Why does it feel like we're always owing something? Rent, loans, credit cards, taxes. Even when one bill is paid, another appears. It's as if debt is a shadow that never leaves. This isn't just modern life. Debt has been with humanity since the very beginning. In ancient Mesopotamia, people carved debts onto clay tablets. In medieval Europe, peasants handed over crops and coins to lords. And today, billions swipe cards or sign contracts without even thinking. But debt is more than numbers on paper. It's about power. To owe is to be controlled. It means your time, your labor, and even your future don't fully belong to you. Someone else holds the chain. What's even more striking is how normal this feels. We grow up expecting to owe student loans, mortgages, credit cards. It's not seen as strange, but as inevitable. Yet when you step back, you realize this is one of the most powerful systems ever created. One that shapes lives, economies, and entire nation. Debt has built empires. It has fueled wars. It has crushed families and created fortune. And whether we notice or not, it still dictates the rhythm of our daily lives. So here's the real question. How did a simple promise, you owe me, become a global system that holds billions of people in its grasp? To find the answer, we need to travel back through history and uncover how debt became the invisible chain that still binds us today. To understand why debt feels so natural today, we have to go back thousands of years. The story doesn't begin with banks or credit cards. It begins with ancient civilization, where debt was often the very foundation of society. In Mesopotamia, the cradle of writing, the first records carved into clay tablets weren't poetry or philosophy, they were debt contracts. Farmers borrowed grain for planting, traders borrowed silver for journeys, and temples kept careful track of who owed what. These debts weren't just financial, they were sacred, tied to gods and kings. To break a debt was to break the order of society itself, but ancient debt was also dangerous. Poor harvests or war could trap farmers in cycles of borrowing they could never escape. In response, some rulers declared debt amnesties, wiping the slate clean so that peasants could start over. These weren't acts of kindness, but survival. If too many people were enslaved by debt, society itself collapsed. The same pattern appeared in ancient Greece and Rome. Citizens often pledged land, livestock, or even family members as collateral. If they couldn't pay, the consequences were severe: slavery, exile, or lifelong servitude. Debt wasn't just about economics, it was a weapon of control. By the Middle Ages, debt had spread into every corner of life, from peasants promising a portion of their harvest, to lords, to merchants trading on credit. Owing something became part of daily existence, yet the fear of debt remained constant, the sense that freedom could vanish with a single unpaid obligation. This is the origin of the invisible chain. Debt has never been just numbers. It has always been about who holds power and who must obey. And as we move forward in history, that chain only grows stronger. By the Renaissance, debt had already shaped kingdoms, wars, and trade. But in the 15th and 16th centuries, something new emerged: banks. In Italy, families like the Medici turned lending into a business, creating systems of credit that fueled commerce, exploration, and empire. Debt was no longer just personal, it became global. As European nations expanded overseas, debt financed their journey. Ships, armies, and colonies were all built on borrowed money. Without debt, there would have been no age of exploration. Yet this also meant nations themselves became trapped in cycles of repayment, borrowing endlessly to fund expansion. The Industrial Revolution only deepened this dependency. Factories needed loans for machines, workers needed credit to survive between paychecks, and cities grew on the back of borrowed capital. Banks and lenders gained enormous influence, becoming the hidden engines of modern economies. By the 20th century, debt had moved into the home. Mortgages made home ownership possible. Car loans fueled mobility, and credit cards transformed everyday spending into a form of borrowing. The old stigma of debt began to fade. It was no longer a mark of desperation, but a sign of participation in modern life. But this shift carried hidden dangers. Easy credit encouraged overspending. Nations piled up deficit. Families found themselves juggling mortgages, student loans, and credit cards. Debt was normalized, but it also became inescapable. Today, the modern world runs on debt. Governments borrow to pay for services. Businesses borrow to expand. Individuals borrow just to live. The global economy itself is built on promises to repay. And while this system creates growth, it also ensures one thing: debt is no longer temporary. It's permanent, woven into the very fabric of society. Today, debt is everywhere. Governments borrow trillions, companies run on credit, and individuals carry mortgages, car payments, student loans, and credit cards. Most people alive today will spend the majority of their lives owing something to someone. Debt is no longer an exception, it's the rule. But the real weight of debt isn't just financial, it's psychological. Studies show that carrying debt increases stress, anxiety, and even physical health problems. The constant awareness of owing, the bills piling up, the deadlines approaching, traps the mind in a cycle of fear and pressure. Debt doesn't just take money, it takes peace of mind. And yet, we've normalized it. To buy a house, you must borrow. To get an education, you must borrow. Even to keep up with daily life, many borrow. The system is designed this way because an economy built on debt keeps people working, producing, and consuming. In many ways, debt is the invisible engine of modern capitalism. Looking to the future, the cycle only deepens. Digital credit, online lending, and even micro-debt through apps spread borrowing faster and wider. Some argue this democratizes finance, giving more people access. Others warn it chains entire generations to an endless repayment treadmill. But there are glimmers of change. Movements for debt forgiveness, experiments with universal basic income, and calls for financial reform hint that society knows something is broken. The question is whether we can escape a system so deeply tied to our economy, or if debt will always remain humanity's shadow. Because in the end, the history of debt is not just about money, it's about freedom. And as long as we live in a world where to exist is to owe, that freedom remains just out of reach.